How's it going, everyone? Innovative J-Dog here with yet another Dragon Ball tier list. If you saw my last tier list, I ranked all Saiyan Forms and Power-Ups based on personal preference. But this time, I wanted to talk about villains. Not the villains from the mainline Dragon Ball franchise though, I wanted to focus on a much tinier group of villains that only appear in movies, specials, and OVAs. Of course, there will be a few mainline villains that show up on this list, but I'm only going to be judging them based off of the movie that they appear in, even if it may get a bit tough to do so towards the end of this list. Also, this list mainly consists of a movie's main antagonist and occasionally a secondary antagonist that had a huge role in their respective films. I'm not including all of the lesser known minions that we see, or else this list would get massively cluttered. But with all that being said, let's get right into my ranking of all the Dragon Ball movie villains. Starting off this ranking is King Guru Mez. Some of you may not remember who this guy is, and that's fair, mainly because he isn't a memorable character outside of his design. He's not terrible by any means, but I don't think he's shown nearly enough or developed the way that he should have been throughout the Curse of the Blood Rubies movie. I do like the idea of him being a cursed soul from the rubies, but while that's one positive factor about Guru Mez, I just don't really remember him as fondly as the other movie villains, which is why I'm going to have to put him down here in the F tier rank. Now, Lucifer is actually a pretty cool villain because his motives are interesting. Well, the way he wishes to enact those motives, I should say. Yeah, he has that generic ideology of wanting to rule over everything with the undead as his servants, but him wanting to destroy the sun in order to enact that plan is nothing short of intriguing. I also like how he can deceive people based upon his looks, as he is a vampire after all. In fact, he sorta serves as inspiration for Zarbon, as he's able to charm Bulma with his elegant looks, despite hiding a much more sinister state. Lucifer is actually one of the few purely made-for-movies villains from the original Dragon Ball, and I wish they would have made more unique characters as opposed to reusing already established ones. Villains that were made for movies is something that I really loved about the old DBZ films. Next up is Minister Shen. You may recognize him as Master Shen of the Crane School, as he appears in the canon lore of the Dragon Ball franchise. Rather than serving as the Master of the Crane School, Shen serves as the Minister of Mifan under Emperor Chaozu's rule in Mystical Adventure. Mystical Adventure is a pretty weird movie since it takes already established characters and displays them in a different light through a different story. Personally, I don't like this movie's interpretation of Shen as much as the canonical version of the character. While the idea of him trying to seize control of the Mifan kingdom from underneath Chaozu is pretty cool, I much prefer him being the deceitful martial arts master from the actual series. General Tao, on the other hand, is pretty cool despite working under Shen throughout the entire movie. Everybody remembers how cool of an antagonist Mercenary Tao was in the original Dragon Ball, and he was actually one of my favorite villains from the original series, but sadly, I'm not taking all of his actions from the show into account for this ranking, and I'm going to judge his character based solely from this movie. General Tao is basically the exact same character as Mercenary Tao, and even has a more active role throughout the film over his brother Shen, making me like him a tad bit more. However, his character just seems too summarized in this film for me to enjoy all the things that he does, if that makes any sense. My point is, I much prefer Tao in the series over this movie. Alright, Path to Power is no doubt one of the better Dragon Ball films, at least in my personal opinion. It isn't my favorite, as it's just a retelling of the classic Dragon Ball storyline with a few twists here and there, but a big reason as to why I love this movie so much though is actually due to the final villain of the film. Staff Officer Black, in my opinion, gets a proper spotlight in this movie mainly due to that fantastic Android 8 death scene accompanied by Goku's Kamehameha. The reason as to why I like Black over Red in this movie is due to how much he does in its final act and the physical threat that he poses to Goku. He actually has more meaning to the plot over Commander Red in my opinion. But don't get me wrong, Commander Red is great and all, he's the main man behind the Red Ribbon Army up until Black takes it over and renames it to the Black Ribbon Army, but I just don't like him as much as Staff Officer Black for some reason, even though it's pretty great seeing him be a ruthless military leader. I just think the original series paints Commander Red in a different, more fleshed out light, so I like him more there, but I like Black more in this movie when compared to the series. It's kind of a weird thing and I may get some flack for it, but I'm gonna have to put Red down here. Now, I'll admit, I haven't always been the biggest fan of Garlic Jr. He was actually my most hated movie villain for quite some time when I was younger, and I honestly couldn't explain why. But after making my Gohan's Hidden Trilogy discussion video, I've started to get a bit more respect for his character that was displayed in the Dead Zone movie and his dynamic with the main cast, especially Gohan and Kami. Nowadays, I just see him as an average movie villain that I don't hate nearly as much as I used to. In fact, I'd say he's pretty alright. For quite some time, Dr. Wheelo was in the same boat as Garlic Jr. I didn't really hate him, but I never really liked him until a few years ago. His character was always weird to me, and his design never really spoke out to me until I grew older. The idea of Wheelo wanting to steal Goku's body grew on me, and honestly, I don't know what I was thinking about with his design. It's fantastic looking back at it. I love when Dragon Ball incorporates science-oriented villains, and Dr. Wheelo is one of the best examples of this. Wheelo is definitely one of the most underrated movie villains, and because of that, I've started to love him more and more. Finally, it's time to talk about the original evil Goku. Turles is the dark mirror version of what Goku could have been had he not hit his head as a baby. I, along with many other people, love Turles and wish we could have seen more of him in future films. He's one of the Saiyans that I would have loved seeing get some more backstory behind him because he's just such a menacing character. Everything about him just paints him as a sadistic character who enjoys bringing harm to others, and on top of the cool concept of him being a dark mirror of Goku, he has some pretty unique and awesome attacks that were ingrained in my mind even to this day. No doubt one of my favorite movie villains. I'll be honest, the main reason why I love Lord Slug is due to how similar he is to the Demon King Piccolo, and because he's in the same movie as False Super Saiyan. Lord Slug has a pretty cool design, but aside from that and his great Namek transformation, he's essentially just a retelling of King Piccolo's character. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as I'm sure many people who started the series with Dragon Ball Z had no idea who King Piccolo was, and were introduced to the concept of that character through Slug. He's always been one of the better movie villains for me, but he just isn't as unique as a character as I would have otherwise wanted. Now, Salza is definitely one of the better minion characters for these movie villains, as not only is he original to the movie that he appears in, but he has a pretty huge role behind Cooler himself. Has anyone ever hated Salza? He's basically the Captain Ginyu to Cooler's Frieza, and his armored squadron serves as the main foil to Piccolo, Gohan, and Krillin throughout the film. Of course, he quickly gets pushed to the side once Cooler decides to step in and handle things himself, but Salza definitely deserves his place as one of my more favorite minion characters. Plus, that fight he had with Piccolo was fantastic. Cooler, on the other hand, is terrifying. He's always been one of my favorites due to his combat scenes and his 5th transformation. You can't deny how cool his final form looks. As a kid, I was led on to believe that Cooler was just the better version of Frieza, as he was just stronger than him prior to Fukatsu no F. He was a complete beast with how he manhandles Goku during their fight, and he had one more transformation than his little brother, a transformation that still gives me chills to this day. I loved his transformation scene so much that I even included it in my original intro for my Dragon Ball discussion videos. Some of you may remember that, so no doubt Cooler will always be one of my favorites here in the A rank. Now, while I loved Cooler in Cooler's Revenge, Meta Cooler from the Return of Cooler movie just doesn't sit the same with me. I was always fine seeing him in his metal form, as his design just looks really sleek, and he proves to be a huge threat against Goku and Vegeta, but after watching Team 4 Star's abridged version of the movie, I realized he was just following in his brother's footsteps, as they both were turned into mechanical versions of themselves, seeking revenge. Him copying Frieza just always slipped my mind until it was pointed out. But I will say that Cooler being able to duplicate himself through the Big Getty Star and that final fight with him as a huge gigantic kaiju monster are both fantastic moments in this film. This is still the Cooler that I know and love, just not displayed as perfectly as the other rendition from the previous film. Next up is Android 14, who honestly, I don't have much to say on. I really like the fight scene he has with future Trunks and how he attacked Goku in the city at the beginning of the movie, but aside from those two scenes, he's just another android sent out to murder Goku. The main reason why I like him more than a few other characters on this list is due to his inclusion in Raging Blast 2. He did have pretty generic attacks, but at least we could play as him, so that was pretty cool, right? Android 15 is in the same boat as Android 14, as the two of them are two peas in a pod, as they were introduced together on their mission to kill Goku. I think I like him just a tad bit more because his design and his personality feels more upbeat, but ultimately, the two of them are ranked pretty low in comparison to the true star of the Android 13 movie. I'm honestly surprised that not many people love Android 13 as much as I do. He's one of my favorite movie villains, and I know I've said that a lot, but honestly, I don't really have any clue why. His redneck form is cool and all, but once he absorbs the parts from Android 14 and 15 in order to become Super Android 13, that's where his character really takes off for me. His design is just so wacky, I'm not sure why he becomes blue, but honestly, I can't really complain. He's just always been one of my favorites due to how obscure he was in comparison to the other movie villains. And yeah, like I said, I know I'm saying that for a lot of these characters, but I just love movie villains. Next up is Broly's father, Paragus. He's the main catalyst behind the plot of Dragon Ball Z Movie 8. Much like his appearance in DBS Broly, Paragus is driven by vengeance for Vegeta and his father, but in the original, he seems to have a much more calm and calculating demeanor. The man spent his entire life trying to keep Broly's power controlled, so he could use his son as a slave in order to do his bidding. Honestly, both versions of Paragus are essentially the same aside from a few key elements being different, such as Broly being the cause of his death in Movie 8. Also, this Paragus doesn't have Frieza to help him just go and attack Vegeta straight up. He has to make his own plan to coax Vegeta into his trap. I love them both and their motivations are pretty interesting, so I think I'm gonna have to rank him here. The original Broly, though, steals the show from all the movies that he appears in. His backstory may not be the best, and thankfully it got revamped in Dragon Ball Super, but everything about his character aside from his origin is utterly fantastic. Broly is a terrifying character. His legendary Super Saiyan transformation is not just one of the best developed, but gives him a threatening demeanor over all of the Z fighters. This character is just a monster, and although he lacks the compassion of his DBS counterpart, I'd be lying if I said that I hated the original. He's one of Dragon Ball's most threatening characters due to how insane he is. Plus, he appears in like everything, so you gotta rank him high just because of how much he shows up. Some people could argue that Kogu had just as much importance as Zangya as one of Bojack's henchmen in Bojack Unbound, but I believe Zangya is the character that everyone tends to remember more. She may have met a quick end at the hands of Bojack, but her scene alongside Krillin and her often being referred to as Bojack's right-hand woman sets her apart from the rest. I wish we could have seen more of her in a similar fashion to Salza from Cooler's Revenge, where she takes on the remainder of the Z fighters as Gohan faces off against Bojack, but like I said, we just didn't get to see much of her as a secondary antagonist as much as I would have wanted before she bit the dust, because she had huge potential, but Bojack wasted it. Speaking of Bojack, he's easily one of the better Dragon Ball movie villains for me. He's easily going in the S tier rank as my favorite so far. Bojack to me has always been the better version of Broly. The two of them are essentially the same as their roided out monstrosities, but I think Bojack's backstory sits much better than Broly's. Him being connected to King Kai and getting set free from Cell's destruction is just an ingenious idea, and I honestly wish this movie were canon. It's just that good and fits perfectly. I love his fight against Gohan and how he sparks Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 transformation for the first time after the Cell games. His role as being the first villain for Gohan after his father's passing not only sets him up as a threat to Earth, but gives Gohan the spotlight at a time where he needed it most. Bio Broly. Do I even need to say anything about him? Easily the worst Dragon Ball Z movie villain, but I will admit the concept is better than the execution of a few other characters. This version of Broly isn't really even Broly, he's just a goo monster. The movie itself isn't as bad as everyone makes it out to be, but this character just led DBZ's version of Broly down a dark path of irrelevancy. After talking about DBZ's worst movie villain, it's only fitting that we go straight to the best DBZ movie villain, right? Although I like Bojack's motivation more than Janemba's, as Janemba is just meant to be an evil monster, you can't deny Janemba as one of the franchise's most visually interesting characters. He's the true culmination of everything evil. He's a cool-looking demon with a sword who can cut through reality, and he forced Goku and Vegeta into fusing into Gogeta. Janemba is everything I want out of a non-canon Dragon Ball movie villain. He's got a cool and original design, his character was made specifically for the movie that he was in, and he's just a visual masterpiece and a joy to watch on screen. Next up is Hirudegarn. What's not to love about a gigantic kaiju monster? Hirudegarn's fight scenes in the city are really fantastic, as I love when we get fights in cities for some reason. And his design is so visually interesting to look at, you can really tell how much of a threat this monster is just by looking at him. Wrath of the Dragon, much like Bojack Unbound, is a story that you could easily place into the canon lore of Dragon Ball, and honestly, I'd be perfectly fine if it were made canon. I could go on and on about how great this movie is, but as a villain, Hirudegarn is just a gigantic monster meant to be a gigantic monster. He's really nothing outside of his connection to Tapion and how he was the first to be killed by a Dragon Fist. He's cool and all, the concept of a gigantic kaiju in Dragon Ball is great, but the main reason why I love him is how other characters react to his existence, such as Tapion. Remember when everyone called Beerus Bills? Good times. Good times. Battle of Gods was such a fantastic movie way back in 2013, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite movies of Dragon Ball. It just captures the heart of Dragon Ball, and not only that, it had a fantastic antagonist and spawned one of my favorite Saiyan transformations. Everything about this movie was perfect from both a community standpoint and in terms of the franchise's history, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. Beerus, the God of Destruction, at the time he was the only known God of Destruction, is who I'm here to talk about. This guy was such a huge threat, he was able to knock Goku out of his Super Saiyan 3 form with a karate chop to the neck. Not only was Beerus in an entirely new league from everything that we've seen up until that point, but his personality and his relationship to Whis was something that felt very fresh to Dragon Ball. He felt like he had always been part of the series, and he's aged very nicely alongside the main cast as time moved forward. There's just so much to say and praise about Beerus, but for now, I'm gonna have to rank him in a rank that is worthy of a god. Whis is also a great character, but in the Battle of Gods film, he doesn't do much except run around alongside Beerus and knock him out at the end of the movie. We don't ever get to see Whis fight, which at the time was disappointing, but nowadays we understand why he never needed to. Whis isn't really an antagonist, and neither is Beerus, especially by the time that Fukatsu no F rolls around, but when this movie first came out, we had no idea whether Beerus or Whis had good intentions or not. I remember everyone speculating and being scared about how much power Whis had just because he was able to knock Beerus out. Many people appreciated the mysterious of Whis' character, and looking back, he served as a great secondary antagonist behind Beerus despite not doing much. I'll be honest, I don't like Sorbet that much. Yeah, he resurrected Frieza alongside Tagoma and everything, but aside from that, what does he do besides get killed? Shoot Goku with a ring, knocking him out of Super Saiyan Blue? I guess you could say that this leads into Vegeta revealing Super Saiyan Blue, but Sorbet is pretty useless aside from his sole purpose of reviving Frieza. He even got replaced by Barry Blue after his death, but hey, at least his character didn't just become a vessel for Captain Ginyu like Tagoma's did in Dragon Ball Super. But what can I say about Golden Frieza? The Frieza that appears in Fukkatsu no F, or Resurrection F depending on what you prefer to call it, is the same Frieza that appears in Dragon Ball Z, character development and all. Just golden now. Based off of this movie though, despite the generic idea of him being revived and coming back with a new, powerful transformation, I think Fukkatsu no F does a great job at capturing who Frieza is as a character. Not only are the fight scenes with him great, and his motivations show how far he's come ever since the Namek and Android sagas, but we get to see how ruthless and conniving he is as the film moves forward. He's a very manipulative character, and after having not seen Frieza in forever, this film does a great job at re-establishing who he is to the newer Dragon Ball audience. The Dragon Ball Super version of Paragus is essentially the same exact character as his Dragon Ball Z counterpart. Personally, I like him just a tad bit more due to how fleshed out he is once he travels the planet Vampa in search of his cast-out son, plus as time moves forward and we see Broly get older and stronger, it's really interesting to see Paragus' hatred for Vegeta's family grow rather than have it be sprung on us out of nowhere. Him using Broly as a weapon against Vegeta is fantastic, and stays true to his character, as he wants to use him for vengeance as opposed to domination like his original counterpart. I just love how fleshed out Paragus was before he met his very quick demise. If you're a longtime viewer of my channel, it's no secret that I love Dragon Ball Super's version of Broly. Everything about him has been drastically improved from the original seen in Dragon Ball Z, and I just love how his future has been set up for the franchise. Of course, there's still a lot to love about the original Broly, but personally, being able to connect to the character, see him gain friends, and be freed from his father's control to become his own person, allows his character opportunity to blossom into something more, something special. I'm gonna have to put Broly in the S rank as my favorite movie villain, even though he became an ally at the end. He's just fantastically displayed and developed. Despite being referred to as the main antagonist of A Hero's Legacy, a movie that doesn't really have any big threats, Lord Yao doesn't even show up until the final 10 minutes of the movie. While his design is pretty good, Yao doesn't even really fight anyone. He just sparks Goku Jr.'s Super Saiyan transformation and gets taken down really quickly. He was merely created just to push Goku Jr. into that form. Because of how fast he shows up and leaves late into the film, I'm gonna have to rank him down in the F tier. Next up is Dodoria, and some of you may be wondering why I put Dodoria on this list. I originally wasn't going to put him on this list, but looking back, he did have a huge role alongside Frieza in the Bardock Father of Goku special. He's the person responsible for the murder of Bardock's crew, and much like General Tao in Mystical Adventure, he has a much more active role over the actual main antagonist of the film, and I think his character is really important in pushing Bardock closer to the pivotal moment of the entire special. I liked Dodoria in this special more than I like him in the actual Namek saga. That very pivotal moment that I was talking about was brought about by none other than Frieza. Although he isn't shown fighting at any point during the special, you can really tell how big of a presence Frieza has on every single character and event in the Father of Goku special. Throughout the whole special, we are supposed to connect to Bardock on his long journey. We're supposed to see him defend his people from Frieza's betrayal and be the one to stop this madman. When he goes for the kill, we, the audience, want him to succeed, but everything proves to be in vain when Bardock's attack means absolutely nothing, and Frieza proceeds to blast him, a few of his soldiers, and planet Vegeta into oblivion, marking the beginning of Goku's journey and paving the way for many of the franchise's future events. Frieza's character in this special may not have had much of a physical presence in comparison to other movie villains, but he's no doubt one of the most impactful villains even in the movies to date. Chilled, on the other hand, isn't really anything special. Yes, he is the one to spark Bardock's Super Saiyan transformation, but his entire character is meant to be a mimic of Frieza's. I think his character is alright for what episode of Bardock needed him to be, but like I said, he's just there to give Bardock a winning fight and push him off into a different direction. There's a whole lot more that I can say about Chilled, and I actually have a video planned on this topic soon, but for now, just based off of his character, I'm gonna put him down here since he's just another Frieza. Moving on, I'm a big fan of the History of Trunks special, and I think the future variations of both Android 17 and 18 are fantastic. Despite being the same characters as the ones seen in the Android saga, the future androids are shown to be truly terrifying and deadly. almost to the point of them being entirely different characters. The present androids were less deadly, and they weren't shown to be as dangerous as the ones from Trunks' future. You could really see why he was forced to travel back in time in order to stop these murderous machines, and I think the special does a great job at setting them up as this unstoppable force. So just based off of this special, I'm gonna put Future Android 18 in the A rank. Future Android 17 I like just a tad bit more than his sister, mainly because he had a fantastic fight against Future Gohan. 17 gets more of the spotlight in this special, considering 18 gets more of a spotlight in the actual Android saga towards the end, but the two of them truly are the definition of a tag team. They're both on par with one another, and it's up to personal preference on who you like more, but for me, I'm gonna have to rank Future 17 over his sister due to that fight that I just mentioned. Now, everyone has their favorite obscure villain. Mine just so happens to be Hachiyak. There's really no reason as to why I love his character so much. I think his design is great, but aside from that, he gets taken down relatively quickly by my 5 favorite characters. I believe the main reason why I like him so much is because of how special it felt unlocking him in Raging Blast 2 after watching Plan to eradicate the Super Saiyans. It's just a memory that I cherish from that game, and it's always stuck with me. Into the S rank he goes. Akami isn't really a Dragon Ball villain since it showed up in the Dream 9 collaboration special between Dragon Ball, One Piece, and Toriko. It's a really obscure character that Goku, Luffy, and Toriko all have to fight, and despite how cool it was to see Goku use Super Saiyan 3 to deliver the finishing blow to Akami, it's just a brainless monster created for crossover purposes. I will rank it higher than Lord Yao though, just because it has more meaning to the plot of its film, so sorry Yao. Next up, both Abo and Kato are really obscure characters since they showed up in the Dragon Ball timeline at the wrong time. Tarble states that both characters are around the same strength as the Ginyu Force, possibly even as strong as Frieza's first form, which back in the day would have been terrifying. But they showed up after the defeat of Kid Buu, so you could see how that went down. The idea of both of them being outclassed just because they showed up at the wrong time is utterly hilarious. It's great that Goten and Trunks get time to shine against these two though, so I gotta give them props for that. When it comes to the ranking though, they both go together side by side, but I'll have to put Abo above Kato because I like blue better than red. Akka, on the other hand, I really appreciate since it's both Abo and Kato merged into one powerful warrior, with powerful being used loosely. Whether you prefer to call him Akka or Abo Kato, the design of Akka is great for some reason. I really like its simplicity, and the fact that he gives Goten and Trunks the opportunity to fuse into Gotenks is great on its own. I just wish they could have been the ones to defeat Akka instead of Goku, and now that I think about it, couldn't Akka have easily overthrown Frieza if they were capable of fighting on par with Super Saiyan Gotenks? Ah well, discussion for another day, but hey, these two characters and their merged counterpart were just really fun additions to the Dragon Ball world, no matter how useless they turned out to be. Well, there we have it everyone, that's my official tier list of all Dragon Ball movie, special, and OVA villains over the years. Do you agree with my ranking or is yours different? It probably is, so let me know down in the comments below so we can have that discussion. Much like my Saiyan transformation tier list, I kept the descriptions of these characters a bit short as I would love to talk in depth about them eventually, but for now, I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts on them. Thank you all so very much for sticking around and watching this video. I know it came out a bit late after my previous tier list, but at the end of the day, I hope you enjoyed. If you love Dragon Ball content and want to see more of my videos, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel so you can stay up to date on everything relating to the series. Until my next video, I'll be seeing all of you later. Bye everyone!